June 4th, 1944. RAF Greenham Common, England. The inspection report should have been routine. Daily maintenance check. Standard procedure for the fighter squadrons preparing for what everyone knew was coming. The invasion. D-Day. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe the next day. But soon. Staff Sergeant William Carter stood in the maintenance hangar at 1800 hours, reading the inspection report that had just been filed by the day shift crew, and feeling his stomach drop. 47 aircraft. P-47 Thunderbolts. Fighter bombers that would provide close air support for the invasion. 47 planes that were supposed to be mission ready. Fueled. Armed. Maintained. Ready to take off at first light. But according to this report, they weren't ready. Not even close. The inspection had found critical maintenance issues across almost the entire squadron. Oil leaks, hydraulic failures, engine timing problems, radio malfunctions. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that made the aircraft unflyable. But all of them issues that needed to be fixed before combat operations. Because a plane with an oil leak might make it to France, might even complete its mission, but it might not make it back. And a pilot who didn't make it back because maintenance was deferred was a pilot who died for something completely preventable. The day shift supervisor had filed the report with a note. Recommend maintenance window of 72 hours to address all issues. 72 hours. 3 days. Which would have been fine if D-Day wasn't happening in less than 48 hours. Carter looked at the report again, then at the hangar, at the 47 Thunderbolts lined up outside on the tarmac, each one carrying issues that could kill the pilot flying it. He could report this up the chain, tell command that the aircraft weren't ready, that they needed more time. But he knew what would happen. Command would ask, "Can they fly?" And the answer was yes, they could fly. Just not safely. Command would make the calculation. Invasion timing versus maintenance delays. And they'd choose invasion timing. They'd send the pilots up in compromised aircraft because the strategic necessity outweighed individual risk. Carter understood that logic. But he also understood something else. That he was the one who'd have to look those pilots in the eye and tell them their planes were good enough. That he was the one who'd live with it if any of them didn't come back because of something he could have fixed. Carter looked at his watch. 18-15 hours. Sunset in 2 hours. The aircraft were scheduled to launch at 05:30. That gave him, he did the math, 11.5 hours to fix 47 aircraft. By himself. Because the day shift had gone off duty, and the night shift crew was minimal, just 2 mechanics assigned to emergency repairs. It was impossible. One mechanic couldn't fix 47 aircraft in one night. Even with help, it would take 2 full days. But Carter had learned something in 18 months as a maintenance supervisor. That impossible just meant no one had figured out how to do it yet. What Carter didn't know, what he couldn't have predicted, was that the next 12 hours would push him past every limit he thought he had. Not just physical, but mental. The ability to triage, prioritize, and execute repairs faster than any maintenance manual said was possible. And that his refusal to accept that the aircraft couldn't be ready by morning would save lives in ways he'd never know about. Because the pilots who flew those planes at dawn would never realize how close their aircraft had been to failing them. Who was William Carter? William James. Carter was born in 1918 in Detroit, Michigan. Motor City. His father worked at the Ford plant, assembly line, making Model Ts before the Depression hit. Then Model As. Then whatever Ford was building that year. William grew up around engines. Not flying engines, car engines, but engines nonetheless. By age 10, William could identify what was wrong with a car engine just by listening to it. Not because he'd been formally taught, but because he'd spent his entire childhood in his father's garage, watching. learning. Understanding that machines had rhythms, and when those rhythms were wrong, something was broken. His father taught him the fundamental rule of mechanics. Everything is either aligned, lubricated, or timed. If something's not working, one of those three things is wrong. William learned to think in systems, not individual parts, but how parts work together. How one failure could cascade through multiple systems. How fixing the root cause was always faster than fixing symptoms. By age 16, William was working at a local garage, not as an apprentice, as a full mechanic, faster than most men twice his age. Not because he worked harder, but because he worked smarter. He developed a method. Triage first. Assess every problem. Rank them by criticality and time required. Then execute in the order that maximized overall efficiency. Other mechanics would fix things one at a time. William would fix three things simultaneously. One hand working on an oil change, the other adjusting valve clearances, while mentally planning the next repair. It looked chaotic, but it was ruthlessly efficient. When the war started, William enlisted in the Army Air Forces, told the recruiter he was a mechanic. "Aircraft mechanic?" the recruiter asked. "No," William said, "but engines are engines." They tested him. Mechanical aptitude, perfect. Problem solving, exceptional. They sent him to aircraft maintenance school. 6 months of training on radial engines, hydraulic systems, aircraft-specific repairs. William absorbed it all, not just memorizing procedures, understanding why aircraft were different from cars, higher stakes, more complex systems, less margin for error. By 1943, William was stationed in England, maintaining fighter squadrons, P-47 Thunderbolts, big aircraft, powerful engines, robust design. But like anything mechanical, they needed constant maintenance. Oil changes, spark plug replacements, hydraulic system checks. A dozen small things that individually meant nothing, but collectively meant the difference between an aircraft that flew and an aircraft that killed its pilot. William became known as the fastest mechanic in the squadron, not because he cut corners, but because he'd refined his triage method to an art form. He could look at 10 aircraft with various issues and know instantly which order to fix them to, minimize total downtime, his superiors noticed. By June 1944, William had been promoted to staff sergeant, maintenance supervisor, responsible for quality control across the entire squadron, which meant he reviewed all inspection reports, signed off on all maintenance, and took responsibility when something went wrong. What William didn't know, what he couldn't have anticipated, was that his obsession with efficiency and his refusal to accept that some problems couldn't be solved in the time available was about to be tested in the most extreme way possible. The report that changed everything. The inspection report that landed on Carter's desk at 1800 hours on June 4th wasn't a surprise. Aircraft required constant maintenance. Inspection reports always found something. That was their purpose. What was surprising was the scope. Carter read through the 47 aircraft listed, each one with multiple issues. Aircraft 23.4471, oil leak, port engine cowling. Estimated repair time, 2 hours. Aircraft 23.4472, hydraulic pressure fluctuation. Estimated repair time, 3 hours. Aircraft 23.4473, radio intermittent failure. Estimated repair time, 1.5 hours. On and on. 47 aircraft, over 90 individual issues. Total estimated repair time, 112 hours. With a full maintenance crew of 20 mechanics, that was maybe 6 hours of work. Manageable. But the full crew wouldn't be available until morning. And by morning, the aircraft were supposed to be wheels up for D-Day support missions. Carter could bump the issues to morning, have the crew fix what they could before launch. But that meant sending aircraft up with known issues, and hoping none of those issues became critical during combat. Carter had seen what happened when maintenance was deferred. He'd been the one to write reports after aircraft didn't come back. After investigations revealed that mechanical failure, something preventable, had contributed to a pilot's death. He'd promised himself that he wouldn't let that happen again. Not on his watch. Carter made his decision the way he made all decisions. Quickly, without overthinking. He grabbed his tool bag, walked out to the flight line, and got to work. At 18:30 hours, with the sun beginning to set over the English countryside, William Carter started what would become the longest night of his life. The method that defied logic. Carter's first move wasn't to start fixing things. It was to assess. He walked the entire line of 47 aircraft, quickly, checking each issue listed in the report. Oil leak, confirmed. Hydraulic problem, confirmed. Radio issue, confirmed. But he wasn't just confirming the problems. He was categorizing them. Critical, issues that would definitely cause failure. Important, issues that could cause failure under stress. Minor, issues that reduced performance, but not safety. By 1900 hours, Carter had the full picture. 12 aircraft with critical issues, 23 with important issues, 12 with minor issues. He could fix the critical 12. That was maybe 3 hours of work if he moved fast. The important 23 would take longer. The minor 12 could wait. But Carter knew that important issues had a way of becoming critical during combat. A hydraulic problem that was manageable on the ground became life-threatening when the pilot needed to lower landing gear after taking fire. So Carter did something no maintenance manual recommended. He decided to fix everything. All 47 aircraft, in one night. By himself. The 2 night shift mechanics had been assigned emergency repairs on other aircraft. Carter didn't call them, didn't ask for help, because asking for help meant explaining what he was attempting. And if he explained it, someone would tell him it was impossible. And then he'd have to either give up or argue. And arguing wasted time. So Carter just started working. His method was brutal in its efficiency. He didn't fix one aircraft completely before moving to the next. He fixed one system across multiple aircraft. All the oil leaks first. Moving from plane to plane. Carrying the same tools. Using the same technique. No wasted motion. No switching between different types of repairs. By 2000 hours, he'd fixed all 12 oil leaks. Then he moved to hydraulic systems. Again, plane to plane. Same tools, same procedure. By 2200 hours, 17 hydraulic issues resolved. Carter didn't stop to rest, didn't stop to eat. He worked in a state of pure mechanical focus, hands moving automatically, mind calculating the next move before the current one was finished. It was the most efficient he'd ever been, not because he was working faster, but because he'd eliminated every inefficiency. No walking back for tools. He carried everything he needed. No second guessing. He trusted his assessment and executed. No distractions, just the work. By midnight, Carter had fixed 32 aircraft, 15 to go. But he was starting to slow down. Fatigue wasn't physical yet. It was mental. The concentration required to maintain this level of precision for 6 straight hours was exhausting. His hands were starting to shake, not from tiredness, from the sustained, fine motor control. Carter stopped, looked at his hands, forced them steady, and kept working. What Carter didn't know, what he couldn't have known, was that several officers had walked past the flight line that night, had seen him working alone, had considered ordering him to stop. But something about the way he moved, the absolute focus, the mechanical precision, had made them hesitate and decide to let him continue. Because sometimes, the best thing command can do is stay out of the way of someone who knows exactly what they're doing. The final hours. At 0200 hours, Carter finished the 40th aircraft. 7 to go. 3.5 hours until the scheduled launch time. He was exhausted now. Really exhausted. His back ached from crawling under aircraft. His hands were cut in a dozen places from sharp metal edges. His eyes burned from the harsh work lights he'd set up to illuminate each aircraft. But he kept moving, because stopping meant thinking. And thinking meant acknowledging how tired he was, how impossible this had been, how close he was to not finishing. So Carter didn't think, he just worked. Aircraft 41, radio failure, simple fix. Loose connection in the antenna junction, 15 minutes. Aircraft 42, engine timing off, more complex, requires precise adjustment, 30 minutes. Aircraft 43, hydraulic leak, gasket replacement, 20 minutes. At 0330 hours, Carter finished aircraft 45. 2 to go. 2 hours until launch. He could make it. Probably. Aircraft 46, multiple issues. Oil leak and radio problem. Carter assessed both. The oil leak was critical, had to be fixed. The radio problem was important, but not critical. The pilot could fly with backup communication, decision time, fix both, and risk not finishing aircraft 47, or fix the critical issue and move on. Carter chose thoroughness, fixed both. It cost him 40 minutes, but it meant the aircraft was actually ready, not just barely flyable. Aircraft 47, the last one. Carter looked at his watch. For 5 hours, 45 minutes until the scheduled engine start. The issue on 47 was engine timing. Delicate work, required precision. Normally a 45-minute job. Carter had 45 minutes. Exactly. He started the repair. His hands were shaking badly now, from exhaustion, from sustained, fine motor work. He had to stop twice to steady himself, to force his hands to cooperate. At 0520 hours, with 10 minutes until engine start, Carter finished the final adjustment, closed the engine cowling, locked it, stepped back, and looked at the line of aircraft. 47 P-47s, all of them mission ready. Carter had done it. In 11 hours, he'd completed over 100 hours of maintenance work. By himself. He walked to the maintenance office, signed off on the inspection report. All aircraft cleared for operations. Then he sat down at his desk, and for the first time in 12 hours, he stopped moving. At 0530 hours, the engine started. One by one. 47 Thunderbolts roaring to life. Carter listened. Each engine sounded perfect, clean, strong, ready. The aircraft began taxiing, one after another, taking their positions for takeoff. Carter watched through the office window as they lifted off, climbing into the pre-dawn sky, heading toward France, toward D-Day, toward whatever waited for them over the beaches, every one of them flying aircraft that had been broken 12 hours earlier, and was now perfect. Because one mechanic had refused to accept that it couldn't be done. What Carter didn't know, what he'd never know, was that 3 of those aircraft would take damage over the beaches. Flak hits, engine damage. But because their maintenance had been perfect, because every system was functioning exactly as designed, all 3 pilots made it back to England. Crash landed, but alive. If those aircraft had launched with the original maintenance issues, those pilots would have died. But they didn't, because Carter had spent one night doing the impossible. The missions that flew perfect. The 47 Thunderbolts that launched from RAF Greenham Common at dawn on June 6, 1944, flew 102 combat sorties over the next 3 days. Close air support for the landing forces, strafing runs on German positions, escort missions for bombers, all of them successful, all of them returned safely. No mechanical failures, no maintenance-related incidents. The squadron commander filed a report noting the exceptional readiness and reliability of all aircraft during critical operations. He attributed it to outstanding maintenance procedures and crew diligence. But he didn't know the real story. Didn't know that less than 24 hours before those missions, the entire squadron had been non-mission ready. didn't know that one mechanic had worked through the night to fix 47 aircraft, because Carter never told anyone. Not the commander, not his crew, not even the pilots. He just filed the inspection report as complete and moved on to the next day's maintenance schedule. But word spread anyway, not officially, just whispers among the maintenance crews. Did you hear about Carter? Fixed 47 planes in one night. Impossible. Yeah, but he did it. The other mechanics wanted to know how. Carter tried to explain. Just prioritize, work in batches, eliminate wasted motion. But they could tell it was more than that. It was something about Carter, the way he understood aircraft, the way he could look at a complex problem and see the simple solution, the way he refused to accept that something couldn't be done just because no one had done it before. One of the younger mechanics asked him, "Weren't you exhausted?" Carter thought about it. Yeah, but exhaustion is just information. It tells you you're working hard, doesn't tell you to stop. That became something of a legend in the maintenance crews. Exhaustion is just information. They'd repeat it when facing impossible deadlines, when aircraft needed to be ready faster than seemed possible. It became a reminder that limits were often just assumptions, and assumptions could be wrong. The mechanic who taught efficiency. Carter stayed in the Army Air Forces until 1946. After the war ended, he could have gone home to Detroit, back to car repair, back to the garage life he'd known before the war. But something had changed. Carter had discovered that he was good at more than just fixing things. He was good at teaching people how to think about systems, how to prioritize, how to work efficiently under pressure. He took a job with Boeing, not as a mechanic, as an efficiency consultant, analyzing maintenance procedures, identifying bottlenecks, teaching crews how to reduce turnaround time on aircraft. Carter brought the same method he'd used that night in England. Break complex problems into simple systems, prioritize ruthlessly, eliminate wasted motion. By 1950, Carter's efficiency methods were being used across Boeing's entire maintenance division, reducing aircraft downtime by 30%, increasing crew productivity without increasing hours worked. It wasn't magic. It was just understanding that most inefficiency came from poor organization, not from lack of effort. Carter spent 32 years at Boeing, trained thousands of mechanics, wrote maintenance procedures that became industry standard, and never once mentioned the night he'd fixed 47 aircraft. Because to Carter, that night wasn't extraordinary. It was just an example of what was possible when you stopped asking, "Can this be done?" and started asking, "How do I do this?" Carter retired in 1978, died in 1994, age 76. His obituary mentioned his work at Boeing, his contributions to aircraft maintenance procedures, his influence on industrial efficiency. One sentence, just one, mentioned his military service. Served as aircraft mechanic, U.S. Army Air Forces, World War II. That was all. No mention of D-Day, no mention of the 47 aircraft, no mention of the impossible night. But in aircraft maintenance training programs, Carter's methods are still taught. Not because they're revolutionary, but because they work. Because they're based on a fundamental truth Carter understood better than anyone. That efficiency isn't about working harder, it's about working smarter. And that impossible usually just means no one's figured out the right method yet. The legacy of one night. Today, aircraft maintenance is a highly systematized operation. Computer-assisted diagnostics, standardized procedures, quality control checks at every step. Turnaround times for maintenance are measured and optimized constantly. Much of that traces back to efficiency methods developed in the decades after World War II. And many of those methods came from William Carter's work at Boeing. But the real legacy of that night in June 1944 wasn't the procedures. It was the mindset. The understanding that limits are often self-imposed, that impossible is usually just difficult, and that when lives depend on getting something done, you find a way to get it done. Every aircraft mechanic who's worked on a tight deadline, who's looked at a maintenance schedule that seemed impossible, who's been told, "We need these planes ready by morning," has faced the same choice Carter faced: accept the limitation or refuse it and find a way. Carter chose to find a way and proved that one person, with the right method and absolute commitment, could do what everyone said couldn't be done. The heroes who never flew. There's a memorial in England, near what used to be RAF Greenham Common. It honors the airmen who flew from that base during World War II. The pilots, the bombardiers, the navigators, the men who fought in the air. But there's no memorial to the mechanics, to the ground crews, to the people who made sure those aircraft were ready to fly. William Carter never wanted one, never sought recognition, never talked about what he'd accomplished that night, because to him, he'd just done his job, the job he'd been trained to do, the job he was good at, nothing more. But the 47 pilots who flew those Thunderbolts on D-Day owed their lives to mechanics they never knew, to ground crews who worked through the night to make sure their aircraft were perfect. Carter was one of thousands. Mechanics, armorers, fuel specialists, all of them working behind the scenes, making sure that when pilots climbed into cockpits, everything worked. That's not glamorous work. It doesn't involve combat or heroism in the traditional sense, just competence, dedication, and the understanding that doing your job perfectly matters more than getting credit for it. William Carter fixed 47 aircraft in one night, did something everyone said was impossible, and saved lives he'd never meet, not because he was exceptional, but because he refused to accept that the work couldn't be done. That's not heroism, that's professionalism. And sometimes, professionalism saves more lives than courage ever could.